Welcome to Katie's Classroom. Today's episode is on gene key number 61, which is my SQ for those of you that are in the gene keys. It's part of the Venus sequence. So this actually shows up in my human design chart in Venus on the unconscious side or the design side for those of you that are following human design. And for those that are just tuning in for some inspiration, I do bring this gift. I have the full channel, the 6124 gift of inspiration. And I'm going to talk to you today about what does the dark side of inspiration look like, which is really just the dilemma of knowledge. To know, to not know, that is the question. More importantly, what's even worth knowing? The 61, I like to think of it, I maybe read it somewhere about it being this channel of the mystic. It is a pulse, it's either on or it's off. That's kind of in a nutshell, what inspiration is something that's either turned on or turned off. We can't have inspiration on all the time. I know I had that once. It will drive you crazy. It's important that it comes and it goes in the space, in the silence. But before we can dive into the gift of inspiration, we have to explore the shadow side. If you've tuned into Katie's Classroom before, you know that in order to have a gift, there must be some darkness. Like the gift is the light. The darkness is still a gift, but it's about bringing them together. That is the feminine principle of leadership. The masculine divides where the feminine unites. And so we have to unite the intuition with the knowledge. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where people ask, why? Leaders who ask why are insane. There, I said it. Whew. It is literally psychotic to ask why, when the research is very clear that why engages the right side of the brain that creates a story. If you've ever asked a toddler, why'd you walk in with your muddy shoes? They might tell you Batman did it. But if you ask that toddler, what led you to walking in with these muddy shoes? They're going to give you a play-by-play of what they did. But you can then write the blank. Oh, so why you did it is this reason. Tara Urich's research shows the more you self-reflect asking why, the more anxious and depressed you become. And yet thought leaders like Adam Grant pride themselves on this question. Entire human resource departments are built around the Socratic method of asking why, which as a historian, I find quite odd for the business world. As someone who has built and sold a company, who has built this one, who was hired to build someone else's, Socrates was a philosopher whose entire existence was based on not knowing why. In fact, he asked why so much they poisoned him, but I digress. Asking why engages the mind to create a sense of security in a chaotic world of uncertainty. It is an emotional pressure for humans to attempt to figure it all out that creates the psychosis, i.e., the addiction to using the mind to create a sense of security in a chaotic world of uncertainty. Sit with that definition of psychosis for a moment. The white coats won't give you that one, right? You'll walk into the psych ward and they will tell you that your mind is the problem. And then they try to use the mind to solve it, which is psychosis in of itself. Once again, I digress. To fear uncertainty, to me, is also psychotic. Perhaps if we looked at fear of like fearing uncertainty or just not liking uncertainty as being psychotic, people would run towards it and say, oh no, I love uncertainty, because there is one constant in the world, and it is change and uncertainty. To fear it is as psychotic as it is to fear death. That is also a podcast for another day. This fear of uncertainty drives humans to find a single answer, frantically and rigidly, something they can hold on to, a belief that makes them feel safe without actually integrating the underlying unease. The autonomic nervous system is uneasy. It's making about 90% of humans' decisions unconsciously. Cardiovascular health and the heart disease, #1 killer for women in the United States. All of that is that vagal tone. The heart is here to remind you for what your purpose is. To me, it's psychosis is using the mind to solve problems the mind creates. You don't ask a toddler to solve the mud that they tracked in. They created that. They can't be the ones that uncreate it. Religion and science are the two ways that humans have sought to solve this question of why. Philosophy, perhaps, was another. We don't really have great philosophers of our time. And I suppose we have a few. Eckhart Tolle might want to be in there. And yet, even again, he doesn't want you to know the answer because then he can't sell you the answer. But do you see what I mean by frantically and rigidly holding on to beliefs? If not, go question someone about the science or go question somebody about their religious beliefs and see how they react. Their entire worldview would collapse if they were wrong. This is ultimately the problem of science. If you've ever, like me, professionally coached scientists and those guys in academia, the women too, you can't spend your life's work and then tell everybody your life's work was wrong. Your entire ego would collapse. And so the song plays on and on as these thought leaders drive you to seek the answer to why in an effort to sell you inspiration. I believe if Simon Sinek had done the research that Terry Urick did, then perhaps people would be asking what instead of why. But Simon was trying to sell you something, which is why he said that you start with why. Like literally the entire presentation was about marketing. And I sat there watching the psychosis of the world as people started coming up with their why. He literally just told you this is how you get people to buy because the right brain is making up a story. Get very animated when I talk about this because I suppose this is my worldview. The great irony here is that once you let go of seeking the answer to why, you can create room to breathe again. And as you learn to breathe through the mental pressure, your body responds accordingly. Do it with me right now. Shift your breathing. But first, you have to notice, where is it? And as you shift your breathing to your belly, focusing on each breath coming in through the heart and out. You'll notice your body begins to relax. The deeper you're able to breathe, the more you're able to see things differently. This is the light that I mentioned that shines in. I suppose that's why heart math was an inspiration I followed. Getting the trauma sensitive it's not a certification, I have to be a medical professional. Getting the completion of the trauma sensitive certification through heart math. So I have the same tools to help regulate that perhaps your therapist or doctor would have. Not enough of them. It's not in the medical schools yet, just optional training. But the results, ooh, they're real big into science over there. Over the weekend, through plant prana, I took a peace, protection, harmony in the Venus class. And we spent day one with our autonomic nervous system and our vagal tone, focusing on regulation, dysregulation, finding in the body what is hidden from you. Your own body is a treasure trove of stuck energy, of homeostasis. This is why people don't change. We have these great fancy, articles about competing priorities. But the ultimate competing priority is your nervous system. And you can move through these big T's, little T's is what they start calling traumas, because everything's a trauma these days. As you start to move through those, your body is still stuck there. I imagine that's why part of this was called a soul retrieval class, to go back and reconcile those parts that are stuck somewhere in the body. Each organ system has its own emotions. But modern medicine missed what the ancients already knew. It's a system. Imagine if you are an IT person and you're like, what? I'm going to change the color of this button over here. That may not impact the rest of the system because it's not intelligent. Intelligence means that everything is interconnected. Artificial intelligence can't be intelligent if it's not truly connected to everything. I digress again. A smart saleswoman never asks the client, why won't you buy my product? Do you imagine sitting in a meeting? Why aren't you buying this? You might ask, what would cause you to buy this? What are you looking for? How would you like it? What might put you in this car today? The only one that's asking you why around your product is someone trying to sell inspiration. Because when we ask you why wouldn't you just purchase my course? It just may plant a seed of doubt. Why do you want to stay the same? Why do you not want to step into this? In that case, asking you why to do something not only plants a seed of doubt, it makes you start to question yourself and become defensive, which in turn creates more doubt. And there's a great way of seeing this play out in real time. Adam Grant and Brene Brown were on a stage and he asked her, why is that your purpose? Why is that what you think is so important? Why? But he just said, why? And it took 3 whys before she lost it. Not surprising. And then she told him how brilliant he was, which was hilarious for someone sitting here watching 2 psychoses, tell each other how brilliant they are. Because if the saleswoman is lucky, the doubt will create desperation. She was desperate for that questioning to end, and he gave it to her. And then looked to the audience to inspire them to buy whatever it is they're selling that will take that feeling away. Brene is a great example because she's written so many books to take the things away that you want, but she's never taken them away from herself. They're still there. I'm going to say this again. Doubt creates a defense in the brain. And when the mind doubts itself, it starts reaching for anything to take that feeling away. Addiction and psychosis come together. And addiction is not about, I have a substance abuse problem. It is, I have a thinking problem. I think in loops. I'm addicted to knowledge, solving my problem. I'm addicted to one more book that will make it so. Inspiration, not psychosis, but inspiration, at least the kind I'm selling, creates capacity for you to breathe through the mental pressure. It invites you to sit with the silence of your breath, to create room for the light to shine in. Beyond just meditation, this is about loosening the hold of your mental constructs based in fear and increasing your capacity for love, starting with yourself. The mind is addicted to logic and criticism. The mind is addicted to criticizing the occupant. That's you. And it's a dark place to live if that is, in fact, the mind. And we know when we hear these people selling their inspiration that they always tell you about, well, that time that they were stuck, but then they found this thing and now they're not stuck. But they are stuck. They're just stuck on a new thing. This is what I mean by light. Light is love. And the world needs more of it. The problem with love thy neighbor as thyself is no one really loves themselves. Or perhaps I should say no adult really loves themselves. Toddlers seem to do okay with this one because they're still full of light. The seriousness of the world has not descended upon many of them just yet. But I digress. That is a blog and a podcast for another day. The gift of inspiration, Gene Key 61, it moves from the shadow of psychosis to the gift of inspiration to the highest expression called sanctity. When we stand in the gift of inspiration, like I did earlier as I got animated, it's so easy to see the psychosis, or the shadow, rather. And you see them as these dualities. But to step beyond that into the third option, sanctity, is to see all of it. Sanctity is to be one with the divine intelligence rooted in the solar plexus. For me personally, this is interesting because I have a wide open solar plexus in the human design system. And it is the seat of my wisdom. It's what allows me to shift and transform and inspire clients with just the right word. Because I'm not in it, I'm with it. Sanctity courageously creates a place for the mind to rest and live without the answers they seek. Imagine living without answers. I had all the answers for how we were going to make house number 1 and house number 2 work. The universe laughed and said, no deal. I didn't have any answers for how we were going to find the extra money for the home we're in, or how we were going to find a mortgage to approve a business owner who's only has a couple years of taxes worth looking at. Those weren't my questions to answer. That was the bank's to answer. The money just shows up. It's energy. It answered with, yes, we would like you to be here and let us help you. I didn't know how we were going to furnish a 4,000 square foot home, but that also wasn't my question to answer. We did a gentleman's handshake with the people that sold the house on the furniture when we got there that day. The day before we closed, they left us more than just all the furniture. They left us a mower, a gator. I didn't know how I was going to walk 5 acres with the property. Now I know if I need to, I can get in the gator and ride around. I didn't know how we were going to mow 5 acres. We just go to the workshop they left us. Something amazing happens when you learn to sit without knowing and you don't look for answers outside yourself. You just wait for them to appear. And oftentimes I hear for people, I can't just sit and do nothing, Katie. And that's a tough one, because I've sat and done nothing and had a really successful business, and I've worked really effing hard. And it was only successful on paper and for the coaches I paid and the business owner that bought it from me. One who has found sanctity in themselves, Richard Rudd writes in his Gene Keys, becomes a sanctuary for others to discover the same peace from within. That's why I wanted the property. And it's also why the story of the property had to be a story where the mind just rests and lives without answers. The money we had all along, in case you were wondering where it came from. This is ultimately why the Owlsen exist and why I I'm here to be a sanctuary for others, to discover the same peace within. I confess I did not have that peace this morning when I thought my trees were going to die because they were over pruned by my loving husband. I suppose that gave me the ability to speak more to the gift. And it was an opportunity for me to immediately see what psychosis looks like in action, trying to solve it with the mind. Let me just Google search and research and find a way. The 61 gene key is ultimately about enjoying the mystery of not knowing. I talk to my clients a lot about Scooby Doo. You know, that dog enjoyed every mystery. He got all the snacks. He didn't care. Is it a ghost? Is it a human? It was fun, not knowing. We don't go to the movies because we know. And yet, the world wants to know. Doesn't get more psychotic than that. So, as someone living in a world where arguably I'm one of, I don't know how many of us are out there that are not living in a psychosis every day anyway. Although every time I do, it brings me closer to the humans, as I say. As you contemplate whether you're part of the gene key system or not, as you contemplate psychosis or inspiration, or my favorite part of that, which is sanctity, where do you notice that you're stuck in unhealthy mental loops, an addiction to judging yourself or others? What mental pressures are driving you to seek answers? More importantly, are you ready to step out of the mass psychosis that the world is living in? And who will inspire you along the way? Is it me? Give a hoot. Book your discovery call. One session is all it takes to get inspired and soar into aligned action. This is ultimately why the sanctuary is here, the Owl's Inn, a place for you to step out of the addiction of the mental loops that you live in and invent something new. Something I learned this weekend is we're all just trying to reinvent what once was. This is your invitation to invent what's never been. And also, don't forget to laugh. Give a hoot about humor. It's that seriousness that blocks the light from coming in.